All right. Are we live? Come on.
I think so.
Can you guys hear us?
They definitely can.
They can?
Yeah.
You're better at this than me. I still screw this stuff up, the live stream stuff.
I trust me. It's touch and go.
Yeah. All right. So welcome. You are watching Jay and Styx. Finally. It was requested for so long, and I've got a list of questions. We may have some more people joining us here in a moment. Styx, how are you tonight?
I'm really well, and also El Papa de los Helados is here. I want to give him a shout out because he is my most voracious fan ever.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
You're gonna sick him on me. He's coming after me.
No, he's everywhere I go. I gotta meet this dude.
All right, we'll give a shout out to him. Maybe he'll win the free Golden Girls t-shirt, as I explained. Whoever has the best question for Styx that we deem the best question gets the free Golden Girls t-shirt, but it's signed by me. So it doesn't make any sense, but that's okay. Don't worry about it. All right, so I've got a bunch of questions. We may have one of my good metal friends joining us, Hesher, and he'll probably have some questions for Styx as well. But what I'd like to, and we also will do super chat questions for Styx as well. And on principle, he will not accept that money-wise, but for those that come on Jay's analysis, I do split the super chats generally. So let that be known. First question for Styx is: I found the curse that you used on Baked Alaska. I found it in this ancient Kabbalah text. It's not ancient, but yes, there is a sorcerer's curse on. No, I'm being dumb. But so first,
I did see that. I thought that was funny, but we worked it out. I talked to Baked.
I'm just joking.
Yeah.
So tell us first of all about your journey, if you don't mind, a little bit, because a lot of my audience probably has heard of you, but might be new to you. So if you want to give just a brief rundown before we get into the meat.
With regards to religion, I assume. I was originally a marginal Christian, sort of not like Unitarian liberal Christian, just general, like, I don't know, Episcopal or something. I can't even remember the denomination of the first church that we went to. We went to it basically on Easter and Christmas. Then later on, around the time I'm in my mid-teens, we became a bit more religious, more piously Christian. I was baptized and confirmed and all that stuff. Then I became an atheist because I was like, well, I don't feel God. I don't see any Jesus. And then finally, through Satanism, which is basically atheism of the floor show, I became sort of a pagan and an occultist. And that's what I am now.
Now, one thing I did want to ask you is that I had a similar experience to you, I think, when you were talking about drugs. And so you mentioned something to the effect of that you had at one time a kind of atheistic view, but you had spiritual experiences. And I'm not trying to trip you up. I'm just curious as to, was it related to something drugs?
No, although I did have experiences on certain psychotropics, salvia divinorum especially. No, these were things that happened to me actually as a kid, but I had largely forgotten about them over time because I never gave them any importance. As a marginal Christian, I wasn't really spiritual, but later on, in retrospect, when I became more interested in that sort of stuff, I had my own as well secondary experiences with the several members of the band Radio Werewolf. Which that's a synchronicity. I could make a half-hour video explaining exactly how this happened. I probably should for people's benefit, but it convinced me that the occult is very much real.
So was it like a stark contrast from like atheistic materialism to the reality of the transcendent spiritual forces, or was it like a gradual process?
A little bit of both, you could say. In one sense, it's very much different, but I maintain the secularity. I maintain the rational, logical side because I think that a lot of the occult is logical. I think that a lot of it is simply science as yet unexplained. Alchemy being, if we look back at it, it was basically chemistry. They didn't fully know how to explain it. They couched it in spiritual terms. It was real. It wasn't fake at all. But they called it alchemy, and they said it had to do with angels or weird compounds that don't actually exist. They weren't quite sure what they were doing, but what they were doing was very much real. So it made sense.
So the Arthur Clarke dictum of what is previously not understood, right? Scientific wise, is Malcolm. Okay, the third dictum. But I mean, you think that these sort of transcendent forces are real or not? I mean, do you think they have like an independent existence, the sort of spirits or whatever they might be?
Yeah, definitely. The problem is that I don't really put a label on it. Like some people would say, if they see something that would approximate what the average person would call a ghost, they will class it as a ghost because that's the norm. I would rather say, well, I saw something strange that I can't quite explain that looked humanoid, and I would leave it at that. And I have seen such a thing on one occasion. But I don't say it was the spirit of some departed person. I have no clue. That's somebody else's opinion, sometimes from centuries before. I think that becomes problematic as well.
Could have been a golden girl. Could have been B. Arthur conveying.
Yes.
And by the way, Hesher, thank you. You're joining us. So this is, I mentioned to Styx earlier. Hesh, you are a Styx fan. You are a metal guy. Just look at that appearance. You can tell he's a metal guy.
Styx, good to see you.
It's good to see you too.
Right. Yeah. Thanks.
Hesh is the host of Alternate Current Radio, so we're glad to have him here. And he does the Hessian session. And we both got questions. So my first question, Hesher, if you missed it, was I was asking Styx about his spiritual experiences. He was saying that he had come from a kind of atheistic perspective at one point, and then into the reality of the transcendent. Also, Styx, are you a member of the 666 Mafia? I have to ask you that one too.
I don't even know what that refers to. I will say just really quickly, though, I am getting a lot of echo, Hesher, from your microphone.
How about now? Give that a shot.
Testing.
Yeah, you're good.
Slightly better, yeah.
Slightly better.
Yeah, sorry about that. Let me know if it.
No, the 666 Mafia, Satanists, you mean?
No, actually, well, they're Memphis rappers, and the reason I brought it up was that when I was trying to get you on this, somebody was saying that Kingpin Skinny Pimp could come on, and then I was thinking, and he was original 666 Mafia, but so I was thinking that maybe there was a connection. It was a dumb joke. Never mind. It was a dumb joke.
No, I'd like to talk to him. It sounds great.
I thought it would be funny to have you and him at the same time because
as long as it's extreme rap with some really warped lyrics, I might like it. Yeah.
Hey, Hesher, do you think you could you mute on your end when you're not talking?
Sure. Yeah. Sorry about that.
Just because there's an echo. But
I had something actually really quickly I wanted to ask Hesher, which is, have you heard of the band Satan, new wave of British heavy metal, early 80s?
Yes, actually, I have.
Trial by Fire. I'll just say, yeah, that's the stuff.
I like that, and some General Witchfinder. It's good stuff.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
What about Halloween? That's what we're here to talk about.
Yeah.
He's a closet Halloween fan.
No, Trial by Fire is like one of the greatest songs I've ever heard.
Yeah, I dig that. I'm glad you brought it up. I'll play that on the session for sure. All right, I'm gonna press this mute button like a wild cowboy over here, you guys.
So we had this background. We got through that. What is? Hello. I can't even see my notes. I gotta.
What?
I don't know. I thought I would. I don't know why I'm dressed. I look like I'm going to like.
You look like Tony. You look like Versetti from Vice City.
or the douchebag in Teen Wolf, his buddy that wears the T-shirt that says, "What are you looking at, Dick Nose?"
No, seriously, you need to get a brick of Coke and go to Miami Beach.
In the 80s.
Yes. 80s. Lots of neon.
Okay, so let's get a little deeper here. So, and I'm going to ask you a question, and I'm not going to be hostile, but I'm going to ask you questions.
Okay.
So Christianity failed, in your view, in the last 20 or 2,000 years. This was, I think, the point you were making to Nick. And one of the questions I had was, it seems to me that if we go that route, that Christianity failed, that we need some kind of standard by which we would judge failure or success. So I take it your perspective on the success would be flourishing, strength, honor, virtue, these kinds of more the pagan virtues, I guess you could say. Is that why you would say Christianity failed, or is it just because of the last 300 years of, say, liberalism?
I would say Christianity failed before that, especially in the Dark Ages. I don't blame Christianity for it, but I say that it didn't help exactly. A lot of people give, for instance, the Catholic Church especially, a lot of leeway, and they say, well, but the monks, the Catholic monks, kept writing and they were literate. Yeah, but the Catholic Church suppressed other people from having the time to become literate, so it didn't actually help. It just retained a very, very small kernel of intelligentsia, I suppose, for several centuries, really. Whereas before that, in the pagan days, the marginal upper middle class was literate. It wasn't just the merchants were literate along with the nobles. It wasn't just nobles and a handful of clerics and politicians. The mercantile class, some of the skilled laborers would have been at least marginally literate. They had to have been to conduct trade. And so I see a backsliding as the result of Christendom. In modern days, Christians did a great job, but the problem is it was largely in spite of Christianity. They stopped interpreting, I think, the doctrine literally, which is why advancement occurred.
Yeah, I think there's some truth to that, but I come from a perspective of Orthodox Christianity, which is a little different from Roman Catholicism. So ironically, a lot of the things that you mentioned in the debate with Nick, that was actually some of the things that I asked Nick about, because I think there were legitimate questions for Roman Catholicism that have not been answered. Orthodoxy is a little different. It retains the idea of hierarchy and mystery, but it also isn't super hyper centralized. So I think that's one of the flaws. And actually, I think you hit on a good point there when you were asking that about asking Nick about that question.
Yeah, I haven't studied quite so much about the orthodoxy. Actually, I do know that I like Orthodox chants a lot.
Yeah,
I have studied the music of Christianity is wonderful. It doesn't matter whether it's the Orthodoxy, Catholicism, even Protestant folk tunes. That one side of Christendom I actually enjoy a lot.
The aesthetic is interesting too. It's a very different aesthetic with the icons and versus the sort of the Gothic. What do you think about? I mean, do you like the Gothic aesthetic though?
No, I hate Gothic. No, yes, I do like Gothic things.
Well, Hesh is going through his goth phase again, so
yeah. See, they said it was just a phase, but I think we're proving that wrong.
So we talked about the Kabbalah curse that you did on Baked Alaska, which I mentioned earlier. So Hesh missed that, but that's why Baked Alaska had his downfall. I'm kidding. So one of the interesting things too that you said about the debate you did with Nick that I agreed with as well was the question of authority. And that's interesting because when Nick and I debated, I think we had the same issue towards the end. Was if you just sort of set up this kind of external authority, then what happens is that when you end up in a circular argument. So I will give you props. I will give you guitar picks for that one because you did, I think, ask a legitimate question about authority. Maybe you could flesh that out a little bit more, like why you thought his argument about authority wasn't very strong.
I think the biggest argument against any religion fundamentally goes beyond that into simply claiming self-evidence. But this isn't just Nick's religion or yours or anyone else's. It's any religion. If I were to claim, hey, Odin, is God, and I were to say, well, I just know it to be true. It says so in the sagas or something like that. Nobody would feel compelled, I think, to take my side on that. Why then would it be the case with Catholicism or anything else? And that's basically what I was pointing out.
What about though? But I mean, doesn't it seem like the nature of my argument would be the nature of truth itself tends to be self-evident? I mean, I think there's something inherently intuitive and self-evident about truth. This is actually one aspect that's different between Orthodoxy and Roman Catholicism is that we don't set up a dialectic, for example, between hierarchy and mysticism and the idea of direct perception of truth. And so Plato, we would say, was actually a little bit closer just in that point. And I noticed that you did mention Plato's Republic, which I thought was curious, only because I'm wondering, do you agree with the Platonic thesis that the individual can sort of tap on into absolute truth in some sense, or absolute certainty? And if so, how does that sort of mesh with the idea of spirituality being something like that's completely individual? Or do you think it's completely individual?
I do think that they can, but it has to be strictly anecdotal and it has to be individual. They can't conflate that with running a society, because other people might not have those experiences. I've had plenty of spiritual experiences. They inform literally everything I do. My video making, my books. People have to understand when they're watching my videos, they're watching miniaturized occult literature rituals anyway. But that doesn't mean that I seek to export that to other people. It might not work for them. They might have a totally different understanding of reality. They need different things. They believe different things. So that would never happen. That's the difference between maybe the occult and a mainstream religion, generally speaking. Not all, but generally, 99% of the time, it seeks to take a certain type of ritual, a certain prayer, a certain deity and stuff. It packages it, and then it gives people sort of a standardized, only loosely capable of being altered sort of religious experience. The amount of actual change that can be done to it is relatively limited. Within the occult, that's not the case. I say I've had my own experiences. I believe my own beliefs.
Do you think it's possible to have false spiritual experiences?
Yeah, probably. But I mean, who's to say just because they're false doesn't mean that they're necessarily bad? They could still lead a person to great things. And Christians have to see this too. Let's say that you're a zealous Catholic or Protestant. You think all these other religions are false. But what if somebody has a religious experience and sees great things anyway and does great things? Well, then the experience itself may have been false, but it still led them to greatness. So what does that say about the realm of spirituality?
That's true, but where I was going with it was more so to ask the question of whether you think that, so if it is possible that there are false spiritual experiences, or that we can be deceived in a spiritual experience, doesn't it seem to suggest that there might be some need for a standard by which to judge a true or a false spiritual experience?
No, because the standard could be established wrong too. The standard itself could be misleading. It could be. I assume you're. A lot of people would assume you're referring to like demons or something. Okay, let's assume. Well, no, you may not, but some people. Let's just say the evil spirits or something are involved in misleading people, or some negative force that wants to destroy or is just chaotic.
What about human emotions? Like charismatics are often sort of blown up with human emotions, talking in so-called tongues.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's not spiritual, but that would definitely be the best example. I would say as a secularist as well. I would agree with you. Let's say that they establish a universal spiritual standard that's totally wrong and actually leads people to eternal suffering. Well, you wouldn't want to establish the standard then.
Well, I guess
it simply boils down to what your opinion deems to be true or not.
Right, but I guess I'm asking a more fundamental question, maybe about the nature of truth itself. I mean, it seems like even when we get to the point of saying we don't want to establish a rule that we impose on everyone else, even that is a kind of imposed rule in a way, even if we don't want it to be, even if it's unintentional.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, it's definitely artificial, because why wouldn't you want to control everyone and rule the world? Of course you do. But I mean, other people don't have to tolerate that, and they probably won't.
Well, true, but I'm saying, like, say, take the non-aggression principle. Like, what do you think that's a universal principle that should, maybe not that you're going to enforce that on everyone, but do you think that everyone should adhere to that principle?
I think it would be the best of all possible worlds if it were adhered to by all people, because then each person could grow, do the things that they want to do, as long as they're not harming anyone else. They would all be equal. It would actually create equality and fairness at the same time by having a sort of libertarian society like that. They would all be free to do as they wish, but they, at the same time, they would have an equality in that they're sort of agreeing generally not to fuck one another over. Now, unfortunately, it's impossible for that to happen. Pragmatically, you have to have a state, you have to have law. There will be, spiritual systems that seek to denigrate people. There will always be corrupt people in government at every possible level. What I would say, though, is that if you have a society that generally holds to the NAP, it will be a better society. But that's just subjective. That's going from the pragmatic side of I exist, I want to be free and do what I want to do. With the NAP in effect in a libertarian society, not only can I do that, but unless I believe in solipsism, all other individuals can do that as well. The state hopefully respects that. There's some degree of respect at higher levels for it too.
Okay, but so like you mentioned with Nick, the idea of the republic and the idea of the noble lie, and that maybe the state should give some kind of religion, or that it should establish some kinds of rules or principles. I guess what I'm asking is, do you believe that there are any absolute principles outside of human social order establishment? Are there anything? In other words, do we discover these truths, or do you think we create them?
There's two answers. I believe in the universal principle of liberty. In that sense, I'm a Luciferian, but that's an anecdote. That's what I happen to believe in. I don't pretend that everyone else is going to believe in it. That's the difference between an organized religion says you must believe X, Y, and Z. The Luciferian side says, I feel this. I happen to believe it. I don't care whether other people adopt it as their own belief.
But do you think other people should adopt the sort of?
I think it's wise, but that's my judgment. They come to their own decisions ultimately. By the way, someone in chat is saying Wicca is paganism, which is about the funniest thing I've ever heard in my life.
Yeah, well, that's funny.
Wicca is not paganism, but
right.
I have respect for Wicca, especially hedge Wicca, but it's not the same thing.
My understanding is that Gerald Gardner actually studied under Crowley, and kind of invented the modern practice of Wicca. I understand that there's older traditions, but
and it's good. It's good to respect nature and pray to the goddess or whatever and be a hippie, but that's what it is.
I guess if I were to sum up the point, what I'm trying to ask here is just in a philosophical question that's very to the point, is just how do we avoid relativism? Or maybe you don't want to avoid relativism, but at the same time kind of want to have principles that we think everybody should adhere to, or are universal. Do you see what I'm saying? Because Plato, for example, did think that we could tap into objective, absolute, principles, things like that. Which
is wonderful as long as everyone agrees on what they've tapped into. Unfortunately, that's never actually happened, never will probably happen, and just leads people to slaughter one another, more or less.
But you also called Nick out for the bandwagon fallacy. I mean, so in other words, a lot of people agreeing with it shouldn't have anything to do with whether it's actually true or not, though, right? Yeah,
but here's the thing. If a lot of people agree in something, you disagree, and they decide to kill you as a heretic, there's not a whole lot you can necessarily do. So then what you want is an enlightened sort of meritocratic system. The problem is actually defining it becomes quite difficult in a spiritual context. We can talk about how to apply the law. We can look at, for instance, we would say the drug war. You can believe whatever morally you want about drugs, but the drug war kills a lot of people. That is a pragmatic statement. That's a pragmatic observation. Mm-hmm. We can say that thus something needs to be done, something needs to change. Maybe we go more all in, maybe we pull back on the drug war, but something has to change. But that's not spiritual, that's physical, observable. We can observe the people getting shot because they had weed. We can observe people that are actually addicted. It's different than when if we're talking about God or demons or something like that. I can't even see these things. Neither can you or anybody else.
Well, I guess.
Or generally people can't see them. Mm-hmm. But that is the claim.
If I were to.
And if I do, I can't prove to others that I have.
If I were to recommend an idea that you might find palatable, to maybe bridge the two worlds from which we come. Are you familiar with Dionysius, the Areopagite?
Yes.
Have you had a chance to ever look at the Celestial Hierarchy or the Ecclesiastical Hierarchy?
Yes, the Divine Intelligences, I believe, is a subtitle. Yeah, I edited that.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, it was a good work.
Yeah, well, that's kind of it's very foundational to orthodoxy. So a big part of orthodoxy will fall back on Dionysius, and he actually comes up a lot in the liturgy. So what I was
if it's related to Dionysius, it's probably wiser than Catholicism, so I'll give it that.
Well, actually, there's a really neat scholar that I interviewed a while back. He's kind of the Oxford guy on Dionysius, and he made a really compelling argument that the chariot mysticism of Ezekiel is really the source of Dionysius. Yes, there's certainly Neoplatonic elements and things like that, but it also
you mean the symbolism of seeing like wheels in the sky and so forth?
The Merkaba tradition, right? Out of
Merkaba,
yeah, right.
That's mentioned as well within Jewish mysticism, quite commonly within Kabbalah.
Right. Well, the Merkaba is
exactly.
word for the chariot mysticism. But I'm just saying, I tend to think that what Neoplatonism, what Dionysius, and what these different angelologies are describing in a kind of perennial sense, maybe a skeletal sense of things, is actually what's in the biblical revelation. So I take a different approach than a lot of maybe the Protestant or the evangelical, or the kind of, oh, everything's demonic when you start talking about angels and hierarchies. I think that's really naive and silly. I mean, actually, there's a very profound angelology of the Old and the New Testament, and it goes into the early church fathers as well, who write quite a bit about that. So I'm just curious what you thought, if you had a lot of thoughts on the early church and Dionysius and that kind of stuff.
I think the early church was better prior to the canonization of the text that would become the Bible, of course. Christianity was almost communal. It was almost a communist movement that actually kind of worked until it was Romanized, when you really think about it. And then the Romans get a hold of it and corrupt it completely. I always thought it was interesting. But then it becomes a different form of paganism, I think, and this was admitted to. I can't remember which early church fathers, I can't remember which ones we're talking about openly, and we're talking about, a few centuries after the Roman Church was actually founded. We're talking about 400, 500 AD. They're already talking about, oh yeah, basically paganism made Christianity over in its image, and I thought that was always funny.
Well, I have to disagree with you there, just because if we look, which this right here, this set is the fathers from about 100 AD to about 400 AD. So there's a lot of actual textual evidence that most of the time isn't really disputed in terms of the date, and they actually testify to most of the practices that a lot of evangelicals, for example, consider Romanized or pagan. So you have, even in the first century, saints, you have an organized liturgy, you have the idea of theurgy, that the priest actually invokes the spirit over the Eucharist and transubstantiates, to use the Catholic term, for lack of a better term. So all of that stuff is actually present in the first, second, third century. So it's kind of a common misconception. I'm not trying to be a dickhead or anything. I'm just saying, a lot of people think that.
Well, yeah, but it was still adapted from centuries before. I mean, some of them were Babylonian practices. By the way, in saying that, it's actually not a bad thing. To me, as a pagan, I have more respect maybe for it because it's present. Whereas if Christianity just comes out of the blue, alters Judaism, and has its own practices, I probably would respect it less. It would be entirely distinct.
Well, I mean, if Jesus is the figure who is looked for in those Old Testament texts, I mean, I understand that you don't accept that interpretation.
No.
I'm just saying, right, but I'm saying if he is, then it makes sense that religion would come out of the Jewish community, and that's what you see, in the Book of Acts. And actually, even today, Orthodox churches really just look like synagogues with icons. We believe that we have the icons because he became incarnate, so it is now proper to image the one who became an image of Christ, right?
Yeah.
So I mean, again, I just have to say I disagree with the idea that for the first 3 centuries, it's not a kind of hierarchical organization. I mean, you see a strict continuity between Athanasius, Justin Martyr, Ignatius. A lot of these first, second, third century fathers are all teaching the same thing.
But it's not hierarchical in maybe the Catholic sense.
No, it is. It is
not quite the same, though. People had a sense of community that was a bit different. That we can look at some of the apocryphal texts. We can find tales of people. I believe it was the Gospel of Mary, or one of these apocryphal texts, showing females as being, priestly. That's something we don't see within Catholicism. Certainly in that era, is because the Romans didn't want to canonize such a work, because they were essentially a patriarchal culture. Not to get into feminism, just so people don't get the wrong idea. I'm not going into feminism. Historically speaking, that's just the way that Rome was. You have all this. Have you read the Book of Tobit?
Yeah, actually, it's in the Orthodox canon. Believe it or not, the Orthodox canon is actually.
Oh, wonderful! Then the Orthodoxy believes in literal magic.
Depending on what you mean by magic, I mean, yes. If you're talking about the story where,
they're using a fish liver, they're using like fish gall to cast off which demon was it, Astaroth or Asmodeus or
yeah, because he's trying to he keeps murdering everybody that's trying to marry her, right?
Yeah, exactly. And they're like, well, enough is enough of this, and I believe it's Gabriel goes with him and gives him this little recipe and this little spell in order to cast him off. Have you read the Testament of Solomon?
Yes.
That's one of the greatest works. Even if you don't believe in any of this stuff, everyone should read the Testament of Solomon just because it's so odd.
What do you think of the Keys of Solomon? I tend to think that that's a very late.
Yeah, that's not original. The notary art is. The notary art apparently comes from several centuries before, but that's the least interesting part of it. The rest of it just claims to be from Solomon, and I've edited the Gosha, the Ars Gosha.
Mm-hmm.
I am going to edit the Thursja, have it illustrated, and then roll all of these works. I want to release the Lesser Keys too, but no, it doesn't have anything to do with ancient times. It's fairly obviously from the late Renaissance at earliest.
It's Renaissance period. Although I did find in Josephus a statement where Josephus claims that Solomon did eventually get into doing magical practices, which that's kind of mentioned in
that's from the Testament though. The Testament puts that in there, and then the Gosha and so forth take off from the Testament, I think, historically. So I think the Testament's 5 centuries older, if I remember correctly.
Next question. Pastor, you got any questions? You want to jump in?
Well, first of all, I want to know if I'm still echoing to you guys or if we have a good comms link on my side. This is the first time I've installed Hangouts, so I'm kind of just...
You're sounding good right now.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, it's better.
Good deal. No, I'm just enjoying the conversation here so far, actually. So I've got 3/4 of my attention, and the other 25% is looking at settings over here. But I think we're good now. I'm enjoying it, definitely.
So let me ask you this. So one of the questions that I would have, one of the reasons I would not adopt paganism would be because to me it seems like it would allow for the highest level of reality or the absolute, whatever sense we want to speak of, all of reality at its highest level, if you even think that's possible. I would say that it seems to leave it under the dominance of chaos. And so ultimately it seems to me that whatever your view of paganism is, or neo-paganism, or whatever, any kind of those, ultimately we get sort of chaos. Now, maybe somebody wants to go down that road. But to me, it seems like how could we have any kind of principles, order in nature, these kinds of things, if we believe that ultimate reality is at root, not only chaotic, but also impersonal. So to me, it seems like the impersonal then sort of triumphs over the personal.
Well, I wouldn't say that paganism is impersonal. What I would say is this, though. Order arises out of chaos. It had to have been. Even if you're a total atheist, you have to then grapple with the fact that out of a roiling stew of nothingness that was completely chaotic or didn't exist at all, we have all of orderly existence or so-called order around us. Even the most hardline atheist has to grapple with that, and that's why one major reason I'm not a hardline atheist or something like that. I would say that paganism, in the sense of adopting chaos and not just entirely an orderly nature, is actually closer to reality. When we look at nature, chaos is a natural part of it. You need chaos. You need renewal. If we look around us, there's nothing that's permanent. It has to be recycled or it becomes old and gangrenous and messed up, really. If you have a life form live too long, it becomes cancerous and leprous and sick. It becomes slow and weak. If it is then killed and other life forms come in and absorb its atomic structure, they're vibrant, they're young. I see that as a spiritual statement, and this happens all around us, and as above, so below, I suppose. And then as below, so above.
Well, I think 2 things on that is, first is that even if we admit the existence of something like the gods or transcendent spiritual beings of some kind or intelligence or whatever, it still seems like what's above them or what's still absolute in the universe, because even they might fight against one another, and there's not any ultimate resolution or telos per se, is that it seems like the fates ultimately, right? And this is what's true of, like ancient Greek religion. Ultimately, it's not Zeus, it's the fates that are, it's chaos even that's above and supersedes Zeus. So it seems to me like it does still end in being impersonal in terms of what's absolute in that system. And then secondly,
I prefer maybe the Norse explanation. If you look at the prophecy of Ragnarok, you have everything is ripped apart, even the gods die, other than I can't remember which one manages to escape that. Afterwards, though, you have the regeneration, everything is reborn. This will happen again over and over again forever, according to that basic system. I see that as superior to the concept of, hey, we're alive now, eventually there's an end time in the Christian sense, and then after that everything is holy, 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 Jesus Almighty, Nephilim casting their crowns, seraphim casting their crowns forever. I don't think that that's realistic. It sounds rather stagnant. Even when I was a Christian, I'll give you an anecdote here. One of the problems that I had with Christianity, even when I was actually practicing Christianity, I believe wholeheartedly in Jesus and the Protestant tradition, was when I looked at Revelation, I said, well, this seems boring. Like once the New Jerusalem comes down, it's the end of all history. There's nothing else to do again. There's no more battle to fight. There's nothing exciting to do. It's just basically, hey, I'm sitting here, I'm necrotic and lazy and stagnant in this big golden cube for the rest of eternity. There's nothing to do. Eventually, I'm going to see every room in this golden cube. I'm going to eat every kind of fruit off of the tree of life. I'm going to walk all of these golden paths, but eventually I'll have seen everything. What is there to do for the rest of eternity? Nothing.
Styx is like, fucking Valhalla, motherfucker. We need to fight and die.
Yeah.
Fight and die. I like it.
Over and over for eternity. That's the kind of life that I want to live.
I can sort of click with that too. I as someone that notices cycles and the cyclic nature of life, that's something that resonates to me as well.
Well, one thing I would say to that is that we don't conceive of the afterlife as what you tend to think of in Protestantism or even Roman Catholicism with Aquinas' doctrine of beatific vision, which is basically just where the spirit sort of goes off into the sky to stare into the essence of God like a giant TV screen for all eternity. We don't believe. I mean, that's literally the way Aquinas describes it in his beatific vision description. No, we actually think that the resurrection plays a central role. This is a big difference between Orthodoxy and Catholicism, is that we are actually resurrected in the bodies that we're in now. Christ, when he was resurrected, it was the same body, and he was able to actually do things that he wasn't previously able to do. So for us, a new heavens and a new earth actually means this entire cosmos, and then being able to sort of rebuild what was intended in Eden to begin with. So
the Orthodox Jesus is David Bowie, essentially.
I
can get behind that.
That's like the Ascension. It's like
No, not to be disrespectful, but so in the Orthodox tradition, okay, you die, New Jerusalem comes down, it's the end of all time, new cosmos, New Jerusalem comes. If I were like a saint or something, if I embraced the Orthodox Jesus and did everything, could I fly around the cosmos then as like a weird disembodied space vampire?
Well, you wouldn't be disembodied. You would have your body. And in fact...
well, that sucks. It'll have to grow old and die again.
Well, no. We think that the body was made to be immortal. That was the purpose of the resurrection.
That's better than the Catholic tradition, at least.
I think there is a lot to be said for the Orthodox conception of the eschaton. And one problem with the idea of eternal return, or the sort of ancient Greek idea of constant death and rebirth, and reading that into eternity, is that from a philosophical perspective, I don't see how it avoids like Zeno's paradox from like ancient Greek philosophy. If we follow that line of thinking, it seems to line up with Zeno's paradox, which is just the idea that change is all illusion, because if we're all going to be back doing the exact same things over and over, like Nietzsche's eternal return or something, to me, it seems like change isn't real. Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah. My own belief, correct me if I'm wrong, is similar to that, which is uncontrollable reincarnation. Essentially, you will live all possible lives for eternity, if that makes sense. I don't believe that there's any escape from mortality. It would be nice, you know, if you could become truly immortal and just be sort of godlike and do whatever you wanted. That sounds pretty cool. But even that might get old after a while.
Yeah, well, yeah, okay. I mean, I guess the problem I'd have with that would be it's kind of like multiple worlds type view or something. I mean,
yeah, string theory plays a part in it.
It seems like at that point, just by logic, like you that's not you. I mean, to be Styx is the guy who went through what he's been through. I mean, that's a part.
But maybe there's a higher self that has all these incarnations, and these are just meaningless, you know, automatons, basically robots that my true self happens to inhabit. Maybe I'll be you in the next life, and I'll be on the other side of the conversation listening to myself, and it'll be very surreal.
It'd be like,
yeah, it'd be very interesting. That sounds better, but here's the thing. Ultimately, it doesn't matter what sounds good or what sounds reasonable or logical. If we're talking about gods and angels and demons and all these things, logic sort of goes out the window at that point. For most people, they're going to say logic either does not matter and they're religious, or logic doesn't figure in because it doesn't make sense.
Yeah, well, I guess that's where I would differ. I mean, most of the time that if I do the debates or whatever, this isn't a debate, but I'm just saying like with JF or with any of the other atheists, you know, I tend to rely heavily on logic, and which I think is an objective metaphysical principle. I don't view logic as like a human creation. I think it's something that's actually discovered and, you know, can be used in a very strong way. So I'm not a fideist. I don't have like a separation between you know, faith and reason. So what would actually
I consider it objective so long as you consider the subjective human experience to be objective. Otherwise, it is itself subjective.
But don't you think there's some kind of common
it doesn't matter if I think that there is, because if I'm wrong, then it ceases to matter. We're talking about things that can't be directly observed, tested, or proved.
Well, but there's a lot of
it doesn't make sense to use logic, which is more observable, to attempt to quantify the spiritual. Like within my own experiences, I'm not going to bother to use logic. It's like if I were to tell people my true experiences, they either believe me or they don't. There's no way I can prove them. I could use logic and say, well, this makes sense because, and here's my premise, and here's my proofs, and so forth. But it's not going to it's going to be Greek to them.
Well, but I mean, there's a lot of things that we all believe in that I think are perfectly rational to believe in and can be proven that are not necessarily empirical, like the past or the self. I mean, it's very rational. It's almost presupposed, you know. A
solipsist would disagree with that, though. They'd say the self is the only self. The past, you know, is basically meaningless, I believe. So. Right,
but it's real easy to refute solipsism. All you have to do is point out that if they learn that solipsism is true, then the learning about solipsism being true is also part of the illusion of their experience, and so therefore it's also not true. So in other words, you could never know. It would be destructive to all possibility of reason or cognition if solipsism were true, and you could never.
The only true way to tell would be to try to kill yourself and see if you persist regardless. If you try to kill yourself 5 or 6 times in a row and you persist nonetheless, you'd say, "Oh shit, I just became an immortal. I'm the only being in existence."
Let's move on here. Am I right? No, I mean,
on that happy note.
That's hilarious. I don't mean to say suicide's hilarious, but you know, somebody will get mad if I say that. But I can't see it. I can't see the super chats. Maybe nobody sent it. Here's one, but
I can't even look at chat at the moment because it was trying to freeze up.
Yeah, Google.
I don't even have chat open at the moment for anyone who's, you know, commenting.
Have we gone an hour? I don't want to keep you too long. How long have we been?
We've been about, I think, 45 minutes or so.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, take those super chats.
Let's see. I see one here. This is for you. This is from Gar Itar. And it says, this is Styx, is there any karmic judgment at the end of life? And if so, what supreme deity has dominion over that process and over the judgment of the pagan deities?
I don't believe in karmic judgment. I don't believe in an objective right or wrong. I think people face consequences within life. So that's my answer to that.
Oh, wait, here's the super chat window. Okay. Here we go. Here they are. Okay. Joe Blow. I have a high regard for Christianity. However, the modern church seems more like a big business fake. Jay, what do you think of the modern church? Just real quick, I would say, yeah, I would agree with that, especially in the West. The Orthodox take is that Roman Catholicism became very corrupt around the time of early Middle Ages and the rise of the Avignon papacy. The Renaissance papacy is when it really started going downhill, the Filioque, obviously. And so then we just have a degeneration in terms of religion in the West, and the rise of modernism in the churches, the rise of liberalism that comes directly out of the Enlightenment. That's my take on what happened to the modern church in the West. But Orthodoxy, I think, is unique and different from that, and actually is vibrant and spreading.
Can I interject something really quickly? The Avignon popes, was the pope that held the joust of the whores one of the Avignon popes? I thought that was later.
That sounds right, but actually, the Medici were known, the two worst were the Medicis, and the Avignon popes were known for the most outlandish stuff.
The joust of the whores?
Oh God. Yes, one of the popes held this. He took chestnuts and would throw them on the floor and had prostitutes groveling like pigs after them. Then he had an orgy with his people there.
Thank you. I was curious. I wonder.
In Orthodoxy, when people get older, we do the joust of the elderly, which is something it's a little more, So the Golden Girls, they would have been jousted for fun, but no.
And then the last person to be able to still stand is the winner.
Okay, next. This is your super chat time, guys. If you want to send super chats, since on principle, Styx does not accept super chat. I will split these with Hesher and Alternate Current Radio, which hosts the Jay's Analysis podcast and many other great shows, 21st Century Wire, etc. Next question is Ventolin. Is libertarianism the most satanic of the political philosophies? Jay and Styx. Go ahead.
Absolutely. It's literally the basis of the Church of Satan was might is right, and might is right is an objectivist sort of thing, sort of an Ayn Randian manuscript. Late 1800s, publicly available. You should look it up. It's very interesting, fairly short. There are 14 versions of it at this point. But yes, it is basically a libertarian manifesto with a handful of authoritarian overtones in sort of a nationalistic sense. But by and large, it's totally Ancapistan. Like, it's further out there than I would go.
Yeah, I think that's pretty clear. And I've actually argued for a long time that libertarianism is, at root, in principle, satanic. Absolutely. I'm glad that Styx absolutely admits that as well.
Yeah, totally. Yes.
Yeah, I got to back that one up too, man. And my conversations with Jay over time on the Boiler Room podcast have been one of the things that kind of took me across that bridge, because I started this whole game like very apolitical and sort of just floating somewhere between agnosticism and atheism without having to think about it a whole lot, and of course the metalhead background really kind of just puts that F the church sort of thing in your head anyways, as a young person. But it's been really enlightening to me to just hang out with Jay and Spore and Daniel and Randy and all the other guys that come through our podcast each week. And, I think as you go along that progression there, at least for me personally on my path, it was like, when I did become interested in politics, somewhere after 9/11, somewhere between 9/11 and 2007, I started, poking into these things. And all of a sudden, as you come from that apolitical state into the state of, oh, here's this guy, Ron Paul. Like, I just, discovered all these other politicians on the left and the right have been raping us all these years. And here's this Ron Paul guy and, this Kokesh guy and this Jones guy. Like, you find these guys back in 2008, 2009, and all of a sudden libertarianism looks enticing, and it has connections to that anarchism that always looked so cool as a young rocker. And, like, I said, okay, well, maybe we're out of right-left paradigms and we're on into libertarian utopias and non-aggression principles. But then, we started Boiler Room Up. We're 3 years into it. We do this conversation every week. And my discussions with Jay and everyone else in the audience and on the show have really led me to kind of come to that state where it's like, oh my gosh, yeah, this libertarianism thing, this like fervent atheism and fervent anarchism, like they're simply like the more fleshed out versions of like LaVeyism,
Yeah.
essentially, and they're kind of like vapid and they don't really apply to our current situation. So that's I gotta kind of go with you guys there on that one.
And rebellion will always be cool too, because in time, anyone who wants to be cool has to rebel against the establishment. It'll always be sort of a pro-freedom movement. Even if it's fascistic in nature, it'll just be a backlash against some existing authority.
Exactly. If any of the metalheads out there, they'll know this. Like, if you've watched Until the Light Takes Us, there's one line that always sticks out that Thulian Perspective said in that, and that's it's really hard to figure out to know how to rebel. And we, as young people coming up in the society, we feel the need to rebel. We know something's wrong. We're not exactly sure how to do it. And a lot of people are looking for exactly that, and I know for me personally, that was how I ended up in that. And, the metalhead community is very different from most subcultures and subgenres, music, art, whatever. So, that's kind of how I found myself in that. And it's just so interesting to me to be here. And, I've always told Jay, I've been on air with Jay for what, 3.5 years now, Jay?
Absolutely. Yeah.
And coming from a perspective that, from watching you, Styx, I think is probably similar. I know Jay probably gets comments about it. I probably get comments about it. They're like, we want you guys to fight about religion. You know what I mean? Like, people are just clamoring for that. But, I think that we all agree a lot more than a lot of listeners and viewers out there would think we would agree. And, I've always told Jay, like, I've never been interested in watching anybody talk about philosophy and religion together the way that he does. But, his talks on orthodoxy, I think there's way more convergence there. And I think that people will find this discussion very surprising to find out how much convergence there is between individuals like us at this point.
Folks, it is Saturday, 2005. I have with me literal demon goblins. Folks, I said years ago, burn your Halloween CDs. It's going to turn you into Styx. All right. I'm sorry. I get distracted being dumb. Super chats. So, thank you, Anthony, for that donation. Gabriel R. Salvation is an eternal movement towards God, not static. Thank you, Gabriel. Actually, I meant to mention that with Styx. Another distinction from the Orthodox view, actually, I kind of brought it up, but the Orthodox eschatology, since we're resurrected, we believe that there's kind of a continual movement, and it's not like the Platonic stasis, so very distinct. So thank you for that. Next is at Styx. Your belief in reincarnation is based on a zero-sum logic of moral justice, is it not? Otherwise, are you espousing a completely desacralized and nihilistic view of reincarnation?
It's, it basically is a pointless view of reincarnation. You simply do persist. It's based on my understanding of physics. I don't believe that it's possible for the consciousness to simply be snuffed out of existence, because I believe, and it's just a belief. That's all you have to take it for. I don't have any particular proof of this. My belief is that the consciousness is itself a thing. It's not just something that we can describe as sort of an abstract. It is actually a thing. If that is the case, I don't believe that it's exempt from the laws of thermodynamics. It will be retained. If it can't be retained in one body, it'll just jump to another on another dimension or something. But I mean, that's totally just my opinion. It could be totally wrong. And I'll tell people this: if I get to the end of my life and blink out of existence and stop existing because it turns out hardline atheism is true, that's okay. There's nothing that I can do about it if it is true.
Purveyor of mercy. Catholics believe in the resurrection of the body. I know that, Purveyor. I was talking about Aquinas's doctrine of the beatific vision having almost no place for the bodily resurrection. I understand that Catholic theology professes bodily resurrection. Tanner Terry at Styx. Given your view of the world, how are we to make sense of the problem of the one and the many?
In what sense? Individualism versus a sort of community essence?
both a social sense like that, and they probably mean a metaphysical sense of the idea of ultimate particularity and ultimate unity, like in a Platonic sense.
I don't believe in any form of spiritual unity. I believe that these particular selves, the self that I have within me, that you have within you, assuming solipsism isn't true, that those stay separate. I don't believe that they're ever homogenized together. But again, that's could just be wishful thinking. As a libertarian, I take up the line that it's good that I'm separate from the rest of existence. I can witness it. If I was homogenized with everything else, I wouldn't really be able to do that anymore. I would be part of everythingness. It sounds rather unpleasant to me. Buddhist philosophy. I really prefer the Hindu over Buddhist philosophy when it comes to Easternism. The Hindu says, well, do well. You can choose the state of your reincarnation. You can become a god if you want to. I believe Tibetan Buddhism has this in common. But it's best to reincarnate. Whereas in the Buddhist sense, you're trying to liberate yourself. I don't see it as liberating to become part of some weird divine totality. I think it sounds absolutely unpleasant to me.
Well, in our view, yeah, you don't ever merge. You always retain your identity. But for us, one and the many are in harmony. So we try to avoid dialectics. That's a big central aspect to Orthodox theology. But just to give the Orthodox view on one and the many and dialectics. Next up is Pepe, support metal guys. Does that mean you don't support douchebag 80s cokehead guys or just the metal guys? I don't know what that means.
I've got to say that I support both.
Yeah, me too.
Thank you. I'm not a cokehead, by the way, but that we were joking earlier that I look like I'm going to Miami Vice.
You can just hear
the audience should weigh in. Doesn't he look vaguely like Tommy Vercetti from Vice City?
Yeah, definitely.
Vaguely.
Jan
Let's
Hammer.
see.
Yes.
For either of you, do you think it's possible for a Christian and also a person interested in studying the occult? Is it possible to be Christian and study the occult, or is that too much of a contradiction? I spent quite a long time studying the occult. I wouldn't profess to be any kind of expert, but I was curious and I looked into the different ideas. I mean, we live in the internet age. All this stuff is out there. For me personally, I didn't come away with anything except that it all kind of relies on basically Neoplatonism, or back further to ancient Hindu structures. The same idea of what the Kabbalah is roughly the same as the idea of Neoplatonism. So I see them as ultimately ending up in what's called perennialism. And then from perennialism, I think it's just a critique of Hesher. Could you mute that? from the issue of perennialism, it's just a question of is perennialism correct or not, from my vantage point. So I don't believe perennialism, and that's where my investigation into the occult took me. So I would say ultimately no, in terms of biblical strictures. It's not a good idea just because one can be it's playing around with dangerous stuff. But I'm sure
if I may, sure. If I may answer that, there's no biblical stringency against studying the occult. It's against practicing magic. And then there are caveats to that as well. And right. I studied it when I was a Christian, but of course I wasn't dabbling with practicing witchcraft or anything because I thought it was a sin. Later on is when I start actually doing any ritualism, but I was still interested in studying it. And that's part of why I stopped being a Christian, because I began researching other religious movements. It wasn't really witchcraft or Satanism or anything that took me away from Christianity. Some people tried to claim that was it. No, it just had to do with generally looking at the spiritual world in a philosophical sense. There was no longer any reason to remain a Christian, in my mind anyway.
Right, and I agree that the word occult just means secret. I mean, I wrote a book, Esoteric Hollywood, which deals with esoteric symbolism. So I would be a hypocrite if I said no. Secret, hidden things. I mean, if we study, conspiracy, geopolitics, this kind of stuff, it's going to deal with secrets. Espionage is secret. So just depends on what one means. I would not recommend anybody try to invoke the demons. Is my
I would.
So here we go. Nikolai. Patriarch Kirill is a billionaire tobacco, alcohol, KGB agent. They're all Russian nationalists, Putinites. Be honest about orthodoxy. So, yeah, somebody was tweeting at me a New York Times article attacking Kirill, Patriarch of Moscow. And again, Nikolai, why would you accept the New York Times' narrative, which is completely CIA narrative, which is what I said CIA hates the Orthodox Church. It hates Russian Orthodoxy. It's been trying to divide it. I even sent you an article explaining all this, and here you are. But thank you for the 500 rabbits. I don't know what currency your little rabbit.
Probably Rand or something like.
It's Playboy currency. It's little Playboy bunny heads.
What?
I don't know what currency.
It's got to be some weird crypto or something.
Like, yeah. Okay.
YouTube now part of blockchain.
Can we buy it? That's what I want to know.
Thank you. Okay, for $2. Nothing. Let's see. Consciousness. This is Ty. Consciousness is a force of nature like gravity. The universe cannot allow life to simply not exist because the universe would not exist.
Agreed.
Okay. Zero the hero. We Christians are supposed to stay out of politics and focus on the individuals around us. No, we are not. That is not the Orthodox perspective. We have a 1,000+ year empire called Byzantium that refutes that, and our theology refutes that. So, but I'm sure Styx agrees with you that theology should stay out of politics, I guess.
No, people can definitely weigh in on politics while being primarily religious. It's just that I don't think that they should legally mix. I don't think that morality should be legislated based on a scripture or something. If people who are politicians want to be religious, no, they should be able to pray, do whatever you want to do. I don't care if Trump comes out and invokes Jesus every single day. Doesn't bother me one bit.
Gonna be huge. The
Yeah.
interview with Styx is gonna be huge.
Yeah, if it makes him feel better and do better, yeah, I'm all for it.
Jake B. Styx, how can you advocate for the non-aggression principle and be a moral relativist at the same time? How is your faculty for reasoning the NAP possible from a pagan view?
It's called being honest. I'm honest enough to admit that it's essentially my opinion that the NAP happens to be a pragmatic way to govern a society. But it is just my subjective opinion. Whereas other people, for religious or other reasons, will try to claim objectivity. It's still just their opinion, but they will make a false claim that it's more than that. That's what you've got to be wary of within society.
Right. That's probably the point where he and I would have to depart in terms of, I think that absolutes are unavoidable. Even if we try to be strictly relativistic, we still fall into absolutes. That's my take on it. Let's see. Basketball. Thank you, basketball. What do you think about poetry and its tapping into the mystery and beauty of life? Any favorite poems?
Is this towards me?
Both of us, I guess.
Oh, well, there was a book called Limericks that I really liked. I'm not a huge fan of poetry. I like dirty limericks and more of the humorous, maybe dark side of poetry more than anything. A lot of it's just the sort of stuff that people claim is really, really heartfelt or really spiritual or whatever, but ultimately it's just filler that English teachers happen to like because they want to torture their students. So
my favorite poet is Bismarcky, and he has a song about picking boogers on his first tape. That's my favorite poet.
Yeah,
that's not a joke.
Dr. Octagon account as poetry because I'm in.
I'll take prose over poetry any day. Yeah.
TB, tuberculosis. Jay, do you believe the pagan deities were real in any sense? Demons or any kinds of beings, benevolent or malevolent? Actually, Styx made this point to Nick that the Old Testament was henotheism, and in a qualified sense, I actually agree with Nick or with Styx. The Old Testament was henotheistic because the council of the Elohim, mentioned many times in the Old Testament scriptures, is what we believe in. And in fact, that's what we were getting into with the celestial intelligences and Dionysius. And I have an essay that I wrote 5 or 6 years ago. You can find it at Jay's Analysis, how the gods are real. So yes, TB. And I'm guessing Styx would answer that in the same way, in the sense of, no,
yes,
I don't mean
in
that
essence, yeah.
But I mean, you did say that you believe that there were gods or entities in some way, right?
I believe that in some way they're real, yes.
Okay.
Even if it's only within the realm of human intelligence making them real through some weird memetics or something.
Okay.
I believe they exist, yeah.
Let's see. Square peg. Jay, why doesn't God perform miracles anymore that are obvious? Well, there's different ways to answer that. First of all, there are exorcisms that occur quite often in many churches throughout the world. Certainly, one could say that they don't believe in that. I think exorcisms are real. Not every exorcism, but I do think it's a real thing, and that is in fact a miracle. So I do think there are miracles.
But it doesn't heal amputees, though.
I've not personally seen that, but I can't say universal. I can't prove a universal negative, so I can't say that.
Yeah, that would definitely create a lot of belief in God.
Tanner says, Styx, I have another question about your response. I want to understand you. You mentioned the notion of the self. What exactly is a self in your view? How does it cohere with what it is to be a human being?
It's the human consciousness, and it appears to be more than the sum of its parts. It doesn't make sense for the consciousness, as complex as it is, to arise from basically what is, and this is what the brain is, an organic computer. The brain is just a supercomputer that happens to not operate with computer chips. It happens to be neurons. It doesn't, to me, make sense. Again, just my belief. It doesn't make sense that gives rise to a consciousness, the kind of which we possess. That, again, it's totally opinion. I make no further claim about it. It's just an anecdotal sort of thing that I happen to believe in. That's how I govern myself from these beliefs.
All right, we're winding up here. Styx has got to go, I think. I'll probably stay around on the stream and chat and give my post-discussion analysis if anybody wants to hang around. Hesh may hang around depending on what his schedule is, but Gabriel R says, Styx, do you believe in the eternality of personhood, and how do you justify this belief, and how does it affect your worldview?
Yes, I believe that the same consciousness is the one that continues to reincarnate, but we have to remember that memory, that is observing around you, observing myself, this particular body, that's laid waste to once you die. The brain dissolves into mush. The body turns into a pile of dusty bones. So that same consciousness is not capable of retaining any of its memories. When people say that they remember a past life, I laugh endlessly. I don't believe in past life regression or any of that sort of thing. It's physically impossible. And they always seem to have been Napoleon Bonaparte or Washington or Hitler or someone important. They were never a slave or a workaday drone. They were always someone spectacular.
That's what I was going to say. You're never a skank peasant with like no teeth. Like,
yeah,
I did my past life regression, and I was a peasant with syphilis.
If you do a real past life regression, it'd be like, oh, I was a workaday clerk who died of Ebola. And then before that, I was a slave. And before that, I was a slave. And before that, I was like a rice farmer. Oh, and I was a slave before that, too. Oh, the life before that was really, really great. I died in war.
All right. Well, I've kept Styx an hour. He said he wanted to do an hour. So thank you very much. I think that was all the super chats. We hit everybody and a lot of fun.
Yeah, it was great being on.
I'm very, 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 very honored to have you. It was a good talk. Maybe we can come back and do a different crazy talk sometime. What do you think?
I would love that. Maybe politics too.
Oh, that'd be great. Yeah, we do a lot of political stuff. So yeah,
definitely, man. I was noticing your posts for 420 there about the drug war, and there's all this new shit going on with Korea. So plenty to talk about, man.
And especially as midterms get closer, things are going to heat up and up and up. It's going to be chaos, just like 2016. So,
yeah,
all right, cool, man.
A real shit show. So, looking forward to following all your stuff, man. And thanks for having me, you guys. And Jay, I'll stick around for a bit.
Yeah, let's do it. All right, thanks, Stick.
All right, peace out, everyone.
Well, that was interesting. What do you think of that, Hesh?
That was really fun. I'm sorry I had a little bit of echo on my side, but it's my first time on the Hangouts. But yeah, I really enjoyed that. I thought it was a cool discussion. And, I know people kind of show up for blood sports some of the times over here on the internet. But, I mean, I don't know. I liked the way that bridged. I thought it was a really cool discussion.
Yeah, I think a lot of people were asking for a blood sport, and Styx definitely wanted to do more of a conversational style, which is cool. We don't have to have a heated debate. I think if you have 2 or 3 heated debates, then which is actually a minority of the stuff that that goes on, people think, oh, that's all you do is heated debates. No, I mean, how many boiler room heated debates have we had? Like a handful.
A handful, maybe not even a dozen, man.
Out of 160 shows. So the heated debates are only there here and there when I think it's called for. That's only. I mean, I got heated with Robert Taylor because I thought he was trying to be a little sneaky and coming at me, and you coming at me, bro. And then a little bit of heat with JF, but that made for a good show. But generally speaking, no, it's not heat and blood sports. But I'm okay with heat and blood sports. I'm sure there's going to be some more heat in the future, but
plenty of heat.
I missed a little bit of yesterday's boiler room in terms of Syria. Could you tell us a little more about what you were getting into in Syria, what new information that you had? I mean, the last thing I saw was that some people were saying that Trump just did this as kind of a facade. Do you think it was really a facade? You're very politically savvy, geopolitically savvy. What was going on with Syria?
I don't think it was a facade. I don't think it was about Trump trying to find the location of a surface to air defense missiles. I would love it, to be quite honest. I would love it if QAnon was real and there was this grand patriot force working underneath the scenes, and they're communicating secretly with Trump via, esoteric messaging on television shows and commercials and, special bat phones and all that. But I really don't think that's the case. Someday that may be the case. Maybe that's the case right now. But, we've been doing this for a while, and we've seen so many cases of charlatans that come into the independent media, the alternative media, whatever, which, I think those two terms are starting to need to be differentiated, by the way. That's a whole nother topic, because the alternative media, I'm often starting to call the so-called alternative media, because it seems like a lot of the stars inside of it, the people that a lot of listeners and viewers go to for trusted sources, are turning out to be just sort of a same old shtick, a bit of a recipe. And the independent people are the ones that are getting the worst flack in social media, shadow banning, and all that. That's kind of another topic. But back to Trump, I don't know that there's some crazy chess going on here, but I will say I do like the way that Patrick Henningsen has been talking about the magic of Trump. And when he's talking about that, he's kind of referring to like, well, he says this, but then this happens, and we're not really sure how that bridge is gapped. Like, from when he says this, everybody's outraged, from even the mega base to, of course, the left, who are looking to be outraged. But even with this latest one, it's like the Make America Again tribe is hemorrhaging. I mean, he lost Savage, he lost Jones. I mean, that's kind of huge. That
I heard that he and Alex made up. So
okay. Well, I can't be up to the minute with Alex. He loves doing right. But I mean, even Alex went on air and was like,
right,
Trump
crying.
Yeah, totally. It's gonna get worse. And but I'm pleased that the attack stopped. First of all, and it didn't turn into something larger. I mean, it may turn into something larger still, but at this point, the attack stopped. So while you were working on that other stream there in the early hours of Boiler Room this week, we were kind of just going through it. And the previous week was when it was all fresh. There were Tomahawk missiles firing out of the Red Sea into Syria, and French and UK planes are dropping bombs. Our planes are dropping bombs, and a lot of that got shot clean out of the sky. Which
right, I saw that. What did it kill anybody? Or was this just somebody sent an article from Newsmax or Newsweek or something? It's probably bullshit from Newsweek, but saying that there was a prior deal between Lavrov and Trump about what areas would be hit or something like that.
A lot of people are talking about that. I've received some criticism and some flack for not going on air and saying, "Oh, it's all theater, folks," and that may be possible, but we can't prove that at this point. You know, so I'm not going to treat it like it's definitely that, as some viewers would like us to do. Plus, that's not an interesting conversation when you take that logical leap and say, oh, it's all theater, everybody's a gangster, and it's all just to keep us busy. You know, I can't make that logical leap, so I have to look at it from, you know, just the what's happening. And I think it's good that the attack stopped, and it would be wise if they continued to stay backed off on that. But Trump lost a lot of support there. And,
Mm-hmm.
you know, frankly, I think that sucks because it's going to make a re-election much more difficult when you lose the Michael Savage crowd, when you lose the Alex Jones crowd, which maybe he hasn't. You know, maybe Alex has figured out how to.
Well, what do you say to the people that say, well, this is just a repeat of last year, and everybody will just forget about it, and he'll do a couple more, like, you know, attacks on CNN and then gain the base back? Do you think that's enough?
There's something to that. That's I would call that 1D chess. I would call that plain old political chess. And if that's really what it is, you know, if it's really about picking targets that they know aren't going to be war starting targets, and making a front, you know, I could respect that. Maybe, I mean, maybe respect's not the right word, but I could understand that. And I could see how that might be something that could be recovered from for the mega base, you know, the hardcore mega crowd.
Right.
I think that, you know, that could be a recovery. He might be able to get Savage back on board and Jones back on board and those audiences
Right.
on board. And I think people underestimate the power of the Savage and Jones audiences, regardless of what you think of those guys.
Yeah.
They have big audiences and they're influential when it comes to voters. So I don't think it's in Trump's best interest, or anyone who is, you know, Second Amendment friendly, just very simple, like, you know, non-uber liberal viewpoints. It's in all of our worst interest to, you know, totally say, well, F the right, F Trump, as much as, you know, disappointed as I am that happened. You know, I'm still personally thankful that we don't have a Clinton in the White House, regardless of what Trump is doing. And that's a hard swallow thing for me to say because I'm so closely tied to the Syria connection, you know, with our connections to Sunday Wire and Vanessa Beeley, and, you know, all the body of work that's been collected over there at Alternate Current Radio with regards to that conflict.
Yeah, I was getting some heat today from some people, obviously, who are on the anti-Russian side of things. And by the way, Viable Ninja, thank you for this, another super chat. You got that I was being Styles. I didn't know who was going to get that I was trying to be Styles. You got it, buddy.
Where's Styles from?
Styles is Michael J. Fox's buddy in Teen Wolf.
Okay, got it right.
But he's got like the Hawaiian shirt and the sort of coiffed hair and the Ray-Bans and he wears a T-shirt at one point that says, "What are you looking at, Dick Nose?" So
it's also I got this is a compliment, by the way. It's also, there's a little bit of Iceman in there. I like it, man. Right there.
That's what I was going. What was the big debate tonight? Well, not debate, the big discussion tonight. So I knew I had to leave my mark. So I thought I'd go with 80s douchebag. I thought would be a great mark to leave for this epic debate. And by the way, we got up to 700. That's my highest live stream. Thank you, Styx.
Nice.
For bringing all of your fellow naked YouTubers to my channel to up those numbers to 700. And again, I want to say, you're listening to the Jay's Analysis channel. Please subscribe. If you like this conversation, that's what I have at Jay's Analysis at my YouTube channel. It's 600, 700 YouTube videos dealing with the same type of stuff that we talked about tonight. 1,000 articles I've written. I've got a book. Also with me is Hesher from 21stCenturyWire.com and AlternateCurrentRadio.com. Check out those great websites. Yeah, I think he made some interesting points, but to me it seemed like Styx was kind of not getting the point about relativism, which in my view I think is a strong argument. I'm not asking you, Hesh, if you think anybody won because it was just a conversation, it wasn't really a debate. But I think that he's not getting the point about, even if you say it's all just my opinion, but I want a non-aggression principle based state enforcing things, you still are making, like, you're saying that that's what should be the case. You're still sort of assuming and putting forth your objective ideas. So in my view, you can't have like a position that's completely subjective and not dealing with the objective in order to avoid absolute truth. I think we have to either admit there's absolute truth, and if there is, that leads to other things. If there's not, then you can't even make statements like everybody has to accept the non-aggression principle.
Yeah, I know it's tough, man. And I'm sitting here kind of just, on the fence because,
I mean, yeah, I'm not saying you have to take a side. I'm just saying,
well, I'll just be, I'm not looking to take sides either, but I'll just kind of, from my meat and potatoes standpoint, it's like we're getting onto that razor's edge of utopias here, where it's like it's almost like the topic needs to be started with, in a perfect world, ... These, or how do we find this, this thing, this ideal that we can all agree upon? Is it going to be something that we enforce? Is it going to be something that we hope that everybody is agreeing upon? Can we do some sort of ethical agreement as to, yeah, sure, maybe this can be relative until this, you know what I mean? Like, until we reach the realm of, murder and rape and imposing your will upon people, or, you know what I mean? So like, I totally get the gray area there between what you're saying and what Styx is saying. And honestly, I don't have the answer, but to me, it's really interesting, and I would have, 5 years ago, I would have just, totally agreed with Styx and been like, oh, if there's any sort of, religious aspect to this, it's dogmatized, and I don't, I just want to shut myself down to it. But
yeah,
as I've made the, progression to where I'm at now with my political viewpoints, and, and watching your channel and your stuff, and reading all your stuff, and understanding more the orthodoxy component there, it makes a lot more sense to me, and I'm much more drawn to that more traditional sort of, when it comes to moralistically, that religious aspect that I think that you represent really well, which I believe is, from my perspective, where I'm sitting, is far and away outside of things that I've seen that turn me off of religion. For example, I've been near loved ones' deathbeds and had other people who claim to be very religious come in and try to tell that person that, hey, you need to do this and this before you die, or you're going to go to hell. And to me, like, I thought that was really mean. Like, you know what I mean? It's like, at a personal core level, I was like, that's messed up. And that's the kind of thing that makes me distrust and want to have a wall up for religion. So, I give big props to you to kind of helping me, break that down a little bit and understand that, people like you and I are actually fellow travelers. Whereas years ago, I might have felt like, oh, I can't listen to this guy's philosophy because it's connected to this thing that I think is toxic. So, for me personally, it's been a really interesting journey, and to see it culminate tonight with you and Styx, and to be invited to hang out for that has been really interesting and cool for me. So thanks, and sorry about the echoes, by the way.
no, that's all right. I mean, I think, yeah, yeah, orthodoxy is unique. I think that is what I was trying to emphasize in the discussion. One of the things I noticed in Styx's debate with Nick, which is really good, by the way, it's worth watching because there's good points on both sides of the Styx and Nick debate. Nick Fuentes on the Chadcast, which I'll be on tomorrow night if you want to see interesting interview about my book and the TV show I did, Hollywood Decoded. I'll be on Gorilla TV's Chadcast, so that means I'm a Chad. I get to officially say I'm a Chad.
Are there any Buffys? Because where there's a Chad, there should be a Buffy.
I have a Buffy. She'll be around. So I don't know if she'll be around tomorrow night, but she'll be around for some future Chadcasts, right? But there was something I was going to say. I was going to say, I think that one of the things that and this is not a knock on Styx, but I don't know if I haven't heard every Styx video. I've heard a decent amount, but I don't know that if he gets into like the cryptocracy sphere of things. I mean, it's interesting that he's into the esoteric stuff when it comes to religious thought, and he says I apply that to the political sphere. But you know what we talk about a lot at Boiler Room and Jazz Analysis 21st Century, we talk a lot about deep state geopolitics, the deep state, the cryptocracy, conspiracy. Well, let's just be frank here. And I tend to hear a kind of shying away from that in the political sphere in some of the Styx talks. I'm not faulting him for that. Maybe he just doesn't find conspiracies convincing. I don't know what his view of like 9/11 or anything like that is. But I think that what I'm getting at is that the more black pill approach that I take to politics is from having seen for so many years, and I'm not that old, but you know, I'm old enough to know that that a lot of politics is theater, a lot of it's BS, some of it's real. I'm not saying it's all fake, but there's a component of the shadow government aspect of things that a lot of times the libertarian type crowd isn't aware of or shies away from. I mean, you'll get Ron Paul saying, okay, false flags are real, but come on. I mean, it goes a lot deeper than even Ron Paul is willing to admit or can admit, you know, based on his persona or status or whatever. You know, it goes a lot deeper than that. And, you know, that's the kind of stuff that we talk about. We cover some pretty heavy stuff. You know, we get into espionage pretty heavily. We get into, you know, what was really going on in this or that event. And that's actually what they really come after us, trying to censor us for. You know, I'm on my 8th month ban of Facebook. I was given strike over a video discussing a certain event I won't name. And so they really are coming after people that analyze events, which is interesting.
Yeah. And now we're starting to see lawsuits roll out. Jones has got a lawsuit levied against him from what they're calling the parents of Sandy Hook. Sorry if I'm not even allowed to say that, but I mean, I don't see a problem in just mentioning that. It's just a fact. It's an open source fact. You can Google that, you know, if you're out there. That's something that's happening in the news. We're not commenting on what we think about it, although we have in the past. And it's a really interesting situation that we're now having to think about this on live streams. Like, wow, boy, how much can I actually say about this particular event before it, you know, it affects the viewers and the listeners, and they're not able to watch this discussion anymore. You know, never mind what it does to us personally, but you know, it's mostly about the people watching. And you know, certain people have said things like Jones, and now he's facing a legal trouble. So this is a whole new area that we're running into now, especially out here on YouTube. And it's very interesting to me to see how this is working, to see how YouTube is meshing together with corporate entities. And I mean, there's a new Southern Poverty Law Center Hate Watch article up where they're really doing their best to, you know, put people in certain buckets out here on YouTube, right?
And I saw, if I'm correct, that was Sam Harris.
Yes. Yeah. It's really interesting, man. So,
well, and one thing that's interesting about that is I've been very critical, not just of the positions of the new atheists, and I don't know about Sam Harris in particular, but I'm real suspicious of like Dawkins and these characters and a lot of the stuff that they've called for. I think Dawkins is probably some kind of like tool of the establishment. I mean, I don't even, I mean, calling for, like, talking about aliens existing and calling for eating of human meat, cannibalism. I mean, this is beyond just atheism. I think there's more going on with Dawkins, and I'm suspicious of the new atheists as well, that they might be serving a bigger agenda. That's my personal opinion on that. But I'm a little surprised that they would go after Sam Harris.
Well, when I closed out Boiler Room this week, I made a comment about the establishment not being able to get along with itself anymore. There's so many contradictions and so many veils that have been lifted on false news events and fake narratives that everybody is starting to get triggered and point their flashlight at certain things that they say, well, they're like, wait a minute, hold on, this does not mesh with what was going on before. And the left stream media, the mainstream media, whatever you want to call it, is trying to just do the old laser beam of, oh, you're a racist and you're an anti-Semite, and just put people in these buckets. And they're calling people with Jewish descent anti-Semites in some cases now, because they're just, they've messed everything up. They've screwed up their ability to racketeer properly without throwing shade at each other. So they're just stepping all over each other now. And to me, it's really funny to watch.
Well, there was a pretty heated Warski debate right before the debate that I did the other night. By the way, if anybody was wanting to see a blood sport and they were unhappy that Styx and I didn't do a blood sport, just go watch the debate I did with Robert Taylor 2 nights ago, or watch the debates with other atheists, and you can see that that's the same kind of approach that I would take on that topic. But before the debate that we had, the first hour, they did a guy accusing a girl of Holocaust stuff, denial, and then a Jewish guy stepped in to defend her, that questioning things was not anyway. It was just crazy that this Jewish guy stepped in, Halsey, who's done a lot of debates with Nick and other alt-right figures. So, but yeah, I mean, these are great examples of the censorship that is here. I mean, I can't believe we talked about this on Boiler Room for 3 years. We talked about it on 21 Wire. Jay's Analysis talked about it, and we were saying all the text, the deplatforming that they would do, and then here they did it.
Yeah, we're seeing it now. It's crazy. I mean, I was yammering and stammering. Anyone that listened to the live Boiler Room this last Thursday probably heard me like stumbling all over myself trying to figure out if Sean Helton's latest article was out about Parkland. And for anyone that was listening to that live, I got a hold of Sean afterward, and it's like, it's not out yet. It's epic. It's like 18,000 words long. It's the culmination of, everything that you and I and everyone in the ACR Brain Trust came up with as we were, because we jam through these things. When we see something come up, it's like we have our chat and it's just like, bam, it's like a million Luigis and Marios just throwing bowls of spaghetti at the wall and seeing what sticks. And we just did that. And we invited Sean Helton into this group where we were doing that. And Sean has collated all that into an 18,000 word essay on Parkland, an analysis on it. And we're still at this point, because, we're small, we're independent. We don't have super male vitality. We're not selling pills. I mean, we're on Patreon and we're on subscription basis. You know what I mean? Like we're a loose association of rebels between Jay's Analysis and Alternate Current Radio and 21 Wire and some of our other friends. And, we all have our own little income streams. Like, Jay's selling his book and he's hosting Hollywood Decoded. So we kind of all have to promote each other and promote ourselves. And there's this huge body of work that has been collected and collated over all this time. And it's not corporate or anything like that. And we're having to be really careful now, because if we say something wrong, we don't have, $10 million in boner pill money to defend ourselves from a lawsuit. So, when I talk to Sean, it's like, hey, is it out yet? It's like, no, we're reviewing it.
I've had 10,000 boners, but I don't have any pills or the money from 10,000 boners. But
independent media doesn't need pills for the boners, right? Because we're excited about this stuff automatically.
we get worked up. So yeah, all right. Well, I guess we'll close this up. Thank you, everybody. The biggest Jay's Analysis stream, up to 720. Check out my book, Esoteric Hollywood, which is, if you like the Styx chat, you'll love what's in this book. It's all about symbolism in film, geopolitics, conspiracy, the esoteric. You can get it at my site, jaysanalysis.com. $30 signed copies. Those have like 100 20 5-star reviews in the last year. It came out a year ago. So get a copy of that. Esoteric Hollywood 2 will be out in the next few months. Look for that as well. You can watch my TV show Hollywood Decoded at GaiaTV.com. Just Google Hollywood Decoded. You'll see that there. Also go to jaysanalysis.com. You can subscribe to my work, $4.95 a month or $60 a year, or you can donate at the Patreon, links below. And also check out alternatecurrentradio.com. You can donate there. You can also listen to all the great podcasts, but please help them stay afloat, help them keep going, and check out 21stcenturywire.com. And anything else you want to promote, Hesh?
No, we're all good. I want to make sure everybody comes down and joins us every Thursday night live over at alternatecurrentradio.com and often at Jay's Analysis, his YouTube channel right here where you're at right now. For Boiler Room, we're live every Thursday night at 8 p.m. Central. You can join us for Sunday Wire live every Sunday at 11 p.m. Central. And yeah, check us out. And if you want to support us, Patreon and PayPal are available for you to do so. And Jay, thanks, man. It was really fun. And Styx, it was great being on the stream with you. And I'll talk to you guys soon.
All right. Have a good night.